This is A Smaller Life, a podcast hosted by me, Saskia de Feiter. I am a small business owner who wants to grow by going smaller and choose better to do better. Join me on my journey where I figure out how I can make my needlecraft business relevant in this era and in my personal life.
Well, hello. Let me introduce Grace Whowell. Grace is the driving force behind Beyond Measure, a shop that's all about beautiful handmade tools and accessories for needlecrafting. Grace talks about how she started her business and about her plans for the coming years. I hope you enjoy our conversation. All right. Do you want to tell us your story? That sounds like such a big question, but basically I just really want to know how you ended up with Beyond Measure.
Okay. Well, I suppose it goes way, way back to when I was a child. And for as long as I can remember, I've always loved making things. So whether it was like paper or fabric or clay or anything, that was what I was always doing at the weekends, and I loved doing it at school. My mum, she does a lot of embroidery and lace making. My grandmother and my aunt also live with us in the same house. There was 9 of us all together. So so I was lucky to be surrounded by creativity, and I just loved, that's what I did. That's how I spent my time. And then I went to art college, and I did ceramics and painting, but I always ended up in the ceramic studio. So I was always making things. But I suppose I kind of felt that although I loved the process of making, that I wasn't perhaps kind of an artist in my own right. I don't know whether it was a confidence thing or whatever. So I was really interested though in galleries and exhibitions, and that's the route that I took. So I ended up working in Scotland and then back down here in the north of England, organising exhibitions, but it was very much focused on craft. So it was ceramics, woodwork, textiles, and metalwork. And I just loved it. I mean, it was building a sort of network of people that I worked with and whose work that I, could appreciate and buy if I was lucky enough. So that's something I think that has always stayed with me, the kind of beauty of craft and craftsmanship and the skills that are really involved in that. And because I've done things myself, like ceramics, I've also done jewellery making. I've done an upholstery course. I've always done a bit of knitting. I've always done dressmaking, sewing. So I'm kind of a real jack of all trades, but definitely not a master of any of them. But I can appreciate those skills with the people who are good at them. So I worked in galleries, and then I kind of decided to take a bit of a break. I had my 2 sons, and the gallery that I worked in was great, but it was run by a local authority and there was lots of restructuring, and I just thought, I need a bit of a breather. So I was working freelance, and I'd also got back into sewing a lot more. And I suddenly sort of had this idea. I think I was looking for things that I couldn't find for myself. So, like you get beautiful vintage tools and boxes and things that you can find in charity shops. And they've obviously really been treasured and passed down sometimes. But I couldn't find anything that was an equivalent that was kind of new, I guess. And then it just kind of struck me that I knew all these people with all these skills, and I knew kind of what I wanted to be made. And then why don't I just put them together? So it was a kind of, I remember when I had the idea for it, it was an evening in January. I think I was looking for things for my birthday, and it kind of struck me, and I couldn't sleep for about 3 or 4 days because I was just so excited about it, and I had lots of ideas. And that's it. And I just kind of went with it, really. I started to get a small group of products together. And kind of focused on the leather scissor cases. That was one of my first things that I did with a local artist, Matthew. And it just kind of grew, really. It just felt really right. Out of all the things that I'd done, it just combined everything that I loved. So it just felt the right thing at the right time.
Yeah, that sounds like so many things of what you're saying is exactly how it went with me.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah. I love art. I'm not an artist. I love artists. I love the craftsmanship, and bringing everything together suddenly makes you the master of that.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think there's something really satisfying, like whenever I put an exhibition together, that moment when it all comes together and all the work is hung and it looks, it kind of works together as a show. There's something really satisfying, and that the pleasure that you can bring to people when they come and visit. And they, I get comments about that, about my website. People say, I just love going on your website because I just go on and enjoy it. I might not buy anything, but I just like looking. So that's absolutely fine by me.
Yeah.
I know you've got that kind of affinity with things that you're doing and how you work with makers. So I think
we have a lot in common when it comes to that.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, with me, it's a little part of what I do. And with you, I do see you as the expert. You have such a good eye for makers and bringing that collection together. But did you have a web shop from the early beginning, or where did you start selling, and what did your collection look like?
So when I first started, I think I got the idea at the beginning of 2014, I think. And by the Christmas of that year, I'd started like a Facebook page and Instagram, but I didn't have a website. But I'd started to sell a few things sort of through Facebook, just locally, kind of put feelers out. It just took me a long time to get the website together. I was working with a friend on the first website, and that was, I just wanted to get it right, I suppose. And I got some professional photography done. So we started off really with the leather cases, some scissors, some products from Sajou in France, and also some jewellery that was kind of sewing themed, and some wooden products by local wood turners. So it's quite a small kind of core, but I still keep a lot of those products in stock. I'm not about kind of seasonal. And it's really lovely. We had a workshop here the other week, and people had got their scissors and scissor cases and needle cases that they bought from me, and they were using them. And I just thought that was so beautiful, because it was, they'd had them, they supported me, and they obviously getting pleasure from using those products.
Yes.
So I started off and built the website, and the actual website launched in March 2015. And at that point, I was just selling online. So it was kind of trying to sort of build a presence and a following. And at that point, I did that through social media, a mailing list, Instagram, which was a very sort of different thing then.
Yes.
It was instant, you actually saw what people posted as soon as they posted them. But I did make a lot of really nice connections at that stage with people and supporters and other makers and artists. So
were you part of the knitting or sewing scene? I mean, a while back it was a little different than it is now.
Yeah, no, I suppose in some ways it was a bit of a revelation that it was there. At that point, dressmaking and making clothes was my focus. And I'd always done it, but it always been quite solitary.
Yes.
So I suppose at that point there was people like Tilly from Tilly and the Buttons was starting out, and Merchants and Mills. They'd been established a couple of years, I think. But yeah, I was really amazed at this community that was there, and actually how easy and great it was to connect with people. So the knitting community, I suppose, my knitting, I admit, is quite basic. I can knit, and I've always done a bit of knitting, but I don't have great skills there. I'd love to get better. But I realised there was a kind of crossover with haberdashery in general.
Yes.
And the first event that I did was, I think, in the summer of 2015, so just a few months after my website had launched. And that was the Wool Festival in Leeds. And I just didn't know what to expect. And I took some magazines and books. I thought, oh, I'll just be sat there, and it was like, whoa.
Full on.
Suddenly, all these people appeared and they wanted to spend money, and it was fantastic. And not just with me, but with the, the whole of the show.
And that was your
community.
first show?
Yeah. So it was just one day, I think. And yeah, I think it just opened my eyes to what was there. But I certainly didn't feel part of that before anything. It was kind of something that I discovered, I suppose, through social media, when it seemed to be, a bit more of a sort of, I don't know, a gentle pace and easier to connect with people, and not such a kind of, in your face sort of form of media that it is kind of developed into.
Yeah, and coming from the business perspective, it looks like you have such a niche shop, like almost a niche within a niche. But then talking and knowing that you are also connected to sewing, it's actually not. You have like two feet in two different puddles. Or that's probably not an English saying. It's not even a Dutch one. I just made it up.
It makes sense. Fingers in lots of pies is another one, I suppose. Yes. So I've always had difficulty kind of focusing, because I love lots of things and I always get excited about different types of work. And so that, on one hand there's dressmaking and making clothes for myself. Then there's more artistic textiles and, or embroidery, or, obviously mending and that kind of thing are much more popular now. So, I think I did sort of, I suppose I was looking at different areas and what were kind of universal products to those. So, for instance, scissors, everybody kind of needs scissors, and things like needles as well. But it was kind of just things that, in the end, I thought were beautiful or useful and just a good idea and people would like. And they did.
And your collection does have a certain aesthetic. I mean, it's not bright colored plastic items.
Yeah, I think that was the thing that at the beginning I was really trying to get away from. So, for instance, if you try to buy a stitch ripper, most of them are quite sort of throwaway and plastic. And I was just thinking, well, this hasn't always been the case. So it might take a bit more time, it might take a bit more money, but in the end, you'll have something that's nicer to use and that will last a lot longer.
Yes.
And it is that kind of joy of actually using tools as well. People say to me, it's so nice, I don't even mind ripping out my stitches because,
It's completely true. I think we both sold Viticus needles from Hawthorne.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
They're so beautifully crafted. And every time you use them for these kind of techniques that sometimes are so confusing to do, you kind of push the sock to the side. I'll do that later. But if you have really lovely tools, it makes it a joy because you can't wait to use them. And
exactly.
This podcast is called The Smaller Life, which is all focused around making choices and having less, better, prettier items that will last longer and hopefully will even last through another generation.
Exactly.
The things I remember, the button tin that your grandmother had, or my grandmother had these silver pointy things, like beautiful to put on the end of knitting needles.
Oh, wow.
I'll send you a picture because
that's an idea.
Really beautiful. It is an idea. Yes, it is an idea. And I now proudly wear them around my neck with one of those silver crochet hooks. And they're jewelry, they're functional, they're with me, they have memories attached to them. And it's just such a joy to have things around you that every time you use them, you have a good feeling. I feel the same about hand knit socks. One goal in my life is to have only things around me that are beautiful, functional, and just make me happy. If you have a really good kitchen knife, that's amazing to have and to use. Or if the light switch is broken for a long time and you fix it, and that gives you so much joy when it works again. All those little things, right? All those little things. True. If you add them up in your life, if you make these decisions to invest in good and lasting tools, that's such a joy in your life. It sounds a little bit ridiculous if you don't have that experience, but it's not. It's a big difference in your life.
It is, and I think that's what people that's why they buy products from me, because they understand that. And I think if you do make things yourself, you have that understanding because you're investing time and skills in something, whether you're knitting a sweater or a pair of socks or a dress. And I think that's why people who make themselves will appreciate good tools and good materials. And it just makes the whole process so much better, and you will treasure those things and make them last longer and look after them. So it's kind of, in some ways, is there any other way? But I think one thing that, I am aware of is the cost involved in things like that. The products themselves do have a higher price at the end, but I am really conscious of where my price points fall, and I do want to make things affordable to people. I try and price things fairly, with enough for the maker particularly. When I work with a maker, it's always making sure that they get what they need, and it's realistic for them because they've got to make a living.
And how about you?
Yeah, as well. I think I'm not giving things away, and I need to make a living, but I'd rather people came back and kind of kept coming back to look at my shop and supported me in that way than put huge commission on products that isn't realistic. I've always got fairness in mind.
Yes, fairness and realistic in our industry with small makers are such complicated things to navigate, though, when it comes to running a sustainable business in multiple ways, because the business has to hold itself up, and that's sometimes really complicated. I've recently started to work with a woodworker in a different way than I was before that. I work with a lot of people that we're all very small businesses, and a lot of things are based almost on relationships before anything else, which is sometimes very complicated. I've definitely seen some complicated issues with that. Whenever you want to make a business decision, you first have to navigate the connection you have with people, and not only those people, but the people around it, because it sometimes feels like the business part and the friends, they're all intertwined. And I also like to think that it has to do with being identified as a woman, being female, and the way some females like to communicate. It's all very friendly and not very businessy. And sometimes I love it because of that, but sometimes it's also complicated because of that. Sometimes you would just want to say, but that's not a price I can ask, or this is too high or too low, or you should ask more, you should respect your work more. And then I need to bring the price up to my customers, and then the customers they ask for explanation. Why is it that price? So this time I worked with somebody that is much more, I don't know how to explain the difference actually, but it's just like more professional. So I suppose, having worked with artists and makers for a long time, since the mid to late 1990s, that's what I've done. I've worked with galleries and makers. So I think I do have a really good understanding of the whole way that pricing works. And when I started working in galleries, most people weren't even online. A lot of people didn't have their own website, so they were quite basic. So they certainly weren't selling. They were selling through galleries. And there was a way that you would work with a gallery, and there was a kind of understood commission that the gallery would take. And, that was how it was. That was just how it worked. So I think things have really changed over the last 20, 25 years. Obviously, with the internet and people selling direct, pricing can be tricky, but I think most of the people that I work with are very professional, and it is what they do, not kind of just doing it, So I just work with their pricing, and I'm quite happy to do that. I mean, a lot of
galleries also used to work with seller returns. So they would take the goods, try and sell them, and if they don't, they send them back. But I always buy from makers. I always commit to buying the products because quite often it's been commissioned, you know, specifically for my shop. So I have to do that. But I would always offer to do that anyway because it's committing to their work. It's not messing around with any sort of delayed payments. Exactly. And I would also say to people if I thought their work was priced too low, you know, and I have had to do that a few times and say, well, you could, you know, you could charge a bit more for that and people will still pay for it. So I understand what you're saying, but I think I've been quite lucky in the fact that I've got that kind of background and structure that I'm used to. Yes. So it's kind of always worked out pretty well. And also I think of the expectation of customers and what they appreciate. You know, I think sometimes I put things out there and I go, oh, is it going to be too much? You know, but
I know that feeling. Yes.
You know, people get it and they do appreciate it. I'm really thankful for that. And like you say, you can always explain the story behind something and help people to appreciate why it costs so much compared to something that is mass produced somewhere else in a way that we don't know whether it's ethical and you don't know where the materials have come from. So there's a big difference.
Yeah. Do you do that a lot? Educate your customers? And if so, in what way? Hello, friends. I just want to say something to you quickly. So if you're liking the podcast, if you're liking what I'm talking about, consider joining the mailing list. I have bi-weekly updates on the podcast and or business insights and tips. The occasional exercise to get you ahead. If you want to actually talk to other business owners about the things that I talk about here on the podcast, why not become a Whowell community member for as little as €8.50 a month? That's like buying me coffee and a croissant. But don't do it for me though. Do it for yourself because I promise that you will get something out of it, either the emails and or the community. So you can either go to the show notes or sign up through whowell.myflowdesk.com/pattern-shift. I hope you'll join us.
I try to give a good explanation of the products when I sell them, so either online or with a social media post. But I do find that, like I say, people are really kind of understanding and appreciative of the process. I think the only time sometimes is maybe if I do a show, people will pick something up and go, ooh, I could do that. Or
yeah.
Have you got a pattern for that? Or particularly with the wooden products, it's like, oh, my husband's a wood turner, I'll get him to make a few of those. And fair enough, that's great if they can ahead. But I think there's a kind of aesthetic as well that I look for. So it's not just the material, it's the shape and the finish and all those things that combine to make it something that you just want to go, oh, that's so lovely, I really want one of those. And again, that's come, I suppose, from over the years of looking at different makers' work and appreciating different techniques and skills. So hopefully that does come out, and, you know, the people that I'm selling to, that's something they kind of want to buy into as well. So.
Could you describe, let's say, one or two of the products you have in your shop at the moment that you're really excited about?
Yeah, well, some of the new things that I've worked on this year are with Jennifer McDowell from Do Well Design. So she uses reclaimed wood and timber that she constructs together into blocks, and then she turns the blocks. So I'd seen her work. She makes lamp bases and vases, and she makes Christmas decorations. And every time I saw the decorations, I was like, that's a darning egg. It needs to be a darning egg. And I approached her about it, and she was amazing. She just immediately got it. And within a few weeks, we had a batch of eggs, and they're just beautiful. You know, you don't even need to use them. You just want to touch them and feel them and hold them in your hands. So I love her work. I think it's great when something happens really quickly like that. Some things can be really quite slow, and that's partly because you need time to develop products, but also I can be quite distracted by other things. And, you know, people have got lots on their plates. So it can take a long time, but it's nice when things come together quite quickly and just how you expect, or even better than you expect.
Yeah.
So Jennifer's also done some wooden clappers, which will be going on the website soon. And a clapper, if people aren't sure, is like a wooden block which is used particularly when you're pressing fabrics like wool. So once the seam is opened, you can use some moisture or steam, and then you drop the clapper. So it's like a weight which drops onto the seam to keep it open and flat. So it's used in tailoring a lot, and it just gives you a really good open seam. It just gives it some pressure. But again, they're just beautiful objects, and nice to have them around your studio. And I've also got some kits coming out soon with a local embroidery artist. So we'll be launching those in a couple of weeks. And that's been quite a different process because she's quite new to selling her work and wholesaling her work. So we've kind of worked through that together, but she's brilliant. And, you know, she's come out with something really quite quickly but efficiently, and at a price that we can work to. So I'm really excited about launching those as well. And also I've done a lovely collaboration with Dee Hardwick this year, who is, well, she's an artist designer in so many different areas. And that's, again, been a totally different way. Everybody that I work with has a different approach, but they've been really popular, the embroidered cloths. So that's something, a relationship and a collaboration that I'll be looking forward to developing.
So do you often take the position of almost a coach? Do you work with new makers a lot, or is it more established makers?
I have worked with new makers. In the past, when I was just doing exhibitions work, I used to work quite a lot with graduates. So I kind of understand what people are going through when they're just starting out, and, you know, can help with sourcing materials and help with pricing and being realistic about pricing and all those kind of things. So yeah, I think there's definitely people that I've sort of worked with in that way over the years, and we've, you know, has developed into not just because of me, but it's been quite nice to see part of that process and how people have become more established and developed their work. So yeah, I think again it's something that's been really useful, that's come out of my own background in this area. So, or if it might be somebody who's quite established, but they might not have produced the product that I want, you know, in their own work. So it's more of a kind of small batch production and wholesale orders. So it's always exciting, and I think that's the thing that kind of keeps me interested. I mean, I sell, you know, quite established ranges of thread and needles and things, which are constant sellers and obviously manufactured in a totally different way. They're mass produced. So it's nice to have the balance of those and the handmade objects, which is a different way of working completely.
Yeah. Let's take a break for this small announcement. From January 1st, I will leave Instagram. I know, weird, right? I will talk about it in another episode, but for now, I just wanted to let you know, or actually, I have an ask. Please, if you like a Smaller Life podcast, or if you're getting my mails and you like them, or both, please share with your friends. It's super old-fashioned, but I like to believe that if you like something, you will tell your friends. And this way, something will organically grow. Thank you for listening. Thank you for reading. And thank you for sharing. When it comes to selling, we talked about shows or fairs or festivals. Or I never quite know the difference, to be honest.
I think they're all pretty similar, really.
And the web shop. In non-corona times, how often do you sell at shows?
When I started, like I say, I did the show in Leeds and was like, okay, this is a good thing. Maybe I should try more of this, particularly at the beginning when I was trying to get my name out there. So I did quite a lot of usables, and then I started doing the Knitting and Stitching Show, which is a range of shows in the UK, which are much bigger commercial events. And, you know, each show had its own kind of personality, but generally I would do quite well.
So you were saying 9 to 10 shows a year?
yeah, I think that was probably the maximum that I would ever do. And then I kind of realized that, oh, this is really hard.
It is a lot of hard work.
Yeah. What's the really hard bit for me is preparing for the show, because I have so many products. It's kind of thinking, what should I take and how many do I need? And then I have to take the stock off the website. I don't have a very sophisticated system at the moment with stock. My ideal would be to get everything barcoded so I can just zap it.
That would be nice. That would be nice. Yeah. Let's get an intern in.
I know. Ooh. And also because I do have lots of individual products, that makes it harder. But so I kind of maybe slowed down a little bit before Corona. My boys are at school, and I was quite conscious that, you know, maybe a couple of years I was away a lot at weekends, and it's the kind of, like I was saying, the prep beforehand takes a long time and is very involved, and when you come back you're really exhausted, but you've got to get everything back on the website and deal with all the emails and So Katie started working with me a few years ago, and that's been great, because I really needed somebody to help. But I suppose I was getting more realistic about what I could actually physically do. I do have some health issues. I have really bad sciatic pain, so that makes it difficult to do events. And it can wipe me out afterwards. But I was still doing the big shows, things like Edinburgh and the knitting and stitching shows. So the last show I did was before Corona, was right at the end of February 2020 in London, so really just a few weeks before lockdown. But at that point Corona was sort of happening somewhere else, and people were just carrying on as usual, so it all ended quite abruptly.
How did you cope with the whole Brexit thing? Is the bulk of your customers, are they from Great Britain, or is it European or even worldwide? Did you see big changes?
I have seen a massive change, but definitely my EU customers have really kind of dropped off. Also, like the shipping to America became quite drawn out and complicated, just because, you know, there weren't enough people to deal with everything, and, you know, online shopping and mail order went crazy. So I've definitely seen a big difference, and I still do ship to the EU. I'm registered for VAT, so I can ship without VAT, but obviously the customer still has the liability of paying that at the other end. So I'm looking at ways. There are different ways of working around that. I just haven't quite got my head around it.
It's a lot of extra time that you normally would use to do other things, to focus on
exactly.
understanding.
And I do find it quite difficult. You know, you're not dealing with the easiest kind of bodies and organizations, so it's hard to get correct information. You know, there's been a lot of misinformation even put out by people like Royal Mail, so I hope that I can get back to a level that I was before at some point, but I know that people's confidence has been crushed, and compared to how it was just so easy before to ship to the EU. So it's a real shame, because I've had customers saying, you know, I still want to buy, but I just don't know.
I think the word confidence is important here for the customer. If they feel they get some information, because I'm on the other side of the pond. So for me, I do love a bunch of different shops and brands in Great Britain, and I haven't bought anything this whole year because that was my personal decision to not buy anything more this year. But obviously my head has been working and thinking, what am I going to do moving forward? Where am I going to spend my money? And I'm always very conscious about where and how I'm spending my money. And then the UK is suddenly a different option, like not an option, but every time I get information from a brand or a business, that makes me more confident in my choice. So if I get a ballpark of what the extra cost will be, even if they say, well, I have had a customer in the Netherlands and they had to pay about this much extra, that might be enough for me to go like, okay, I might try that, because I don't know anything. As a customer, I have no idea. So it feels huge well, it might be okay. It might not be that much.
Yeah. I think what I found is that some things have gone through with no charges. Some people have had charges that they kind of expected.
Right.
I've not had anybody come back to me saying, oh, this was crazy, I had to refuse the parcel, and I've not had any parcels come back to me. That's good, but I still find it difficult to say, you know, this is how much you will pay, because I don't know, because
you don't
I can
know.
roughly work out what the tax might be, but then the other fees on top of that depend on the carrier and the value of the goods and where they come from.
There's their timing.
Yeah, so there's so many different factors.
Yes.
But yeah, I think it's something that I do need to address, because there are ways around it. But again, that is quite a big investment in a different way. So it's, if I've lost those customers, it's kind of, you know, will I get them back, or do I need to start looking closer to home, or more with the US, because the tax situation there is slightly different. So yeah, I think things have really taken a knock, and I think you know, that's part of the whole situation of the last 18 months.
So moving forward after Corona, after post-Corona, post-Brexit, talking about closer to home, you've made some changes. So what's the newest addition to the business?
So just over a year ago, well, actually, in the April after lockdown, so just at the beginning of lockdown, I saw this property advertised for rent just a couple of miles from where my old business premises was. And I was like, oh, I don't know, it could be interesting. I'll go and have a look. And it's an old doctor's surgery. Well, it's not an old building, it's a newish build. But it was a doctor's, and then it was a children's nursery. So I had a look, and I was thinking, oh, it's got a car park, it's got a toilet, because we did have a toilet in the other place, but
I was going to say,
yeah, it was very basic. The other place I was in, it was called the old fire station. So it was an old industrial building, and it was great, but it was basic. We didn't have hot water. We had one toilet for everybody that all the delivery people would also use, and it wasn't always great. So
I have an image.
Yeah. And I think that at the start of lockdown as well, I was kind of like, oh, okay, you know, it'd be nice to have somewhere that I can have to ourselves. Anyway, so this place came up, and after a bit of negotiation with the rent and everything, I decided to take it on. And the idea was that I could have a shop and a showroom, and also maybe do some workshops and events. So when I took it on, those plans started, but then things changed so much with Corona, and you know, lockdown was on and off and on and off, and retail was shut and open, and it just became really difficult to plan anything. But we really love the building. You know, we've got lots of natural light, there's lots of storage where we can hide things away, and it's just much more user friendly. So starting this year, I suppose, and I moved house as well, so that was another thing which kind of, you know, happened over the year. So starting this autumn, we finally managed to get the shop open 2 days a week, and we've started to put together a workshop program. So I think one thing that I really wanted to do was try and connect with people locally. There's a huge interest in textiles in this area. You know, we've got the whole tradition of textiles going back to the Industrial Revolution, or pre-revolution, because lots of people worked in their homes, you know, as spinners and weavers. So there's a huge connection in the area with textiles, and it's so important to so many people on different levels. And I suppose in the other building, we were working as a mail order business. So you're basically a storeroom and a packing area. And although we'd have open days and events, you know, there wasn't a chance to connect with people so much. So this is really kind of the start of that. Financially, it might not be, you know, obviously I'll have to make sure I kind of cover my costs and break even at least. It can be a boost to income, but I don't know how much it will be. But it's more about actually using the space. We've got quite a bit of outside space here as well, so we can use that. We started to grow some dye plants and some aromatic plants.
Nice.
So it's all quite small scale, and I really want to try and get groups together and engage them in different ways. It has been so difficult because of restrictions and
Absolutely,
social distancing.
Yeah.
But I think it's something that I really want to try and at least see how it works out. And we had our first workshop a couple of weeks ago, and it was just so nice to have people here.
And what kind of workshops do you do?
The first one was with Wendy Ward, and Wendy is a really well-established professional in the sewing industry. She's written lots of books on dressmaking, and she's very knowledgeable about sustainability of fabrics and clothes. And she's one of those people that I connected with really well at the beginning of my business and on Instagram, and we've just kind of stuck, and she's fantastic. So when she moved back up to Yorkshire, it was like, right, okay, we need to get you here. And it was wonderful. She did a hand stitching workshop just using lots of scrappy fabric that we had. People got to try out all the different threads that we have here and needles, and they just made some beautiful pieces. So yeah, I think I just kind of realised that that's something that I want to do more of here and get people in, and hopefully now things will get a bit easier and we can start to do that and start. People love talking about textiles, and it's a real thing that connects people here.
I've had the experience of having the shop with the workshops and the needlecrafts school, basically with different teachers. And I've always loved the combination of it. And it always was necessary to keep the shop going. Just the products alone or the teaching alone was not enough. I had to use all of it and combine all of it. But it was like you, I have many interests, and I always really loved it. And I wish you all the luck and all the fun.
Thank you.
And it looks amazing, and the light is really beautiful. And,
I think it's coming from somewhere that had no windows. I mean, it was big, so you didn't feel claustrophobic,
right?
But you were aware there was no natural light. So here it's quite a lovely kind of filtered light. There's trees. Yeah, it's so much nicer to work here. So so it's exciting.
Yeah. So if you're adding this to your business, the workshop, I was also wondering, because people buy products that are meant to last a long time. I have a friend that collects scissors, so there's always the exception to the rule. But usually people, they buy one or two really nice pairs of scissors and then a darning mushroom and this and this and that, and then they have their collection of nice products complete, and then you have to venture out and find new people, like we always have to as businesses, but some businesses have a bigger job doing that than others. What are your favorite ways to attract new customers, and how do you deal with that?
Well, that's quite interesting, because I guess one of the best ways was actually through doing shows and events. So I would try to spread them out geographically across the country, and it would always lead to sales afterwards in those areas. I could see that. So if I'm not doing as many of those, I kind of need to rethink. I suppose the way that I work is quite disorganized, and I'm very much like ad hoc. I just do things quite spontaneously. I should plan more, definitely. So I think that is something I'll need to look at. I think a lot of people, so maybe when they've bought those things and they've got what they need, quite often they come back and buy for their friends. So word of mouth is one thing that has really worked for me. I have tried magazine and print advertising, but it's really hard to kind of get the kind of feeling for whether people are actually using that or coming back from that. So I'm looking at other ways of doing some online events. This month I'm taking part in the Behind the Seams tour, which is a tour of small businesses. On Instagram it's In a Haystack. Kate, she has a small business, Untitled Thoughts, so they're doing the whole month. So that's actually really going behind the scenes of the business. So if you want, for seeing like actual images of how people work and day-to-day videos. I'm also taking part in the Botanica Yarn Fest in November. which I'm thinking will probably be more of an EU audience. So that's another thing, I think, looking at doing more things online and connecting people with people that way. Developing my mailing list is really important. That is one thing that I know when I send out a mailing list, I'll get sales, and that's from established customers as well.
Yeah.
So obviously you need to get people to sign up to that, but it is the best way for me to reach out to people. So yeah, it's quite interesting. If you have any insights, or I think what you're doing.
I do have our business circle where we talk about these things.
I may have to join.
This month is about planning, and all the things you're saying are the things that other business owners say as well. So we work through these things together and learn from each other and how we do things and what works. So that's what our business circle is
I'll be signing up. I will. No, I think the way that you're working is really interesting. The kind of connecting with people through smaller groups and subscriptions is really good. I think the whole thing is, it's balancing it, isn't it? And it's kind of thinking, well, do I need to take on more staff? Do I need to shift my own focus away from this onto that? And how do I do all this and still manage to have a life and a family
and a family life? Absolutely. And not make too many sacrifices, especially also in health.
Yes.
Because that's the same for me. I think it all comes down to choosing, dropping things that are not building in any way or nourishing.
Exactly. I think one thing that I found really difficult is the fact that I sell lots of beautiful creative products, but I don't really get a chance to do anything myself. So I really want to make more time to do that, because then I can really show people how much enjoyment they can get from things, or how much, what they can do with them. And I just think, what's the point in having that business if you can't be creative yourself?
Absolutely. I agree.
And thinking, well, what do I want from this? And it's not like I've got huge plans to sell the business or make money from it that way. It's something that I need to develop so I can maintain an income. And that helps me day to day. We pay the bills, we have enough money. I'm looking that my partner has a job. So at what point is it enough in a financial way? I'm happy. And as long as you can maintain that, but then you still need the nourishing side and the creative side as well.
Absolutely. I think the word here is, the verb here is balancing, because you will probably never get balanced. It's a verb. It's something that you always work towards one thing and then something else shift. It's a progress, it's a movement. And sometimes it's about money, sometimes it's about soul fulfillment, sometimes it's about creativity and having enough connection with yourself. And if you have a lot of connection with that, you don't need as much money. But if you have enough of this, you don't need much of that. And it always is moving. And one thing I've seen happen, post everything, is that all these businesses are they're all pivoting or reframing or doing something differently, in one way because they have to, but in other ways because they've woken up to something. This is not what lights me up. I am doing something in a way that I don't want to do this for another decade. Or I really need to focus on this a little bit more because I feel like we're moving in a different direction. And so things are shifting, and it's really interesting to me to see what's happening. Some of the big names in at least the knitting industry are changing dramatically, or just stopped doing other things. For me, I'm really curious to see what's going to happen. And I believe that the shift is, without wanting to sound too woo-woo, there's a shift in energy going, and I'm very curious to see what happens. I think a lot of good will come from it.
I hope so. I mean, I think that you're right. And I don't know what would have happened if we hadn't had this break and pause in everything due to Corona. And obviously it's been different for everybody in different ways. But I think that definitely people have kind of reassessed things on lots of different levels, at home, at work, and their own kind of personal well-being. for me, I suppose it made me assess how much work I was putting into the business and what I was getting out of it. And being at home with my family for that time was really interesting. But it kind of, we survived. And so it made me refocus on them a bit and what they need and what's been important to us. I think it will be interesting what comes out of it. And just in a wider, looking at the whole state of the world, those elements of consumerism and products and waste and more the political side of it and power and where those things come from, I hope there is going to be a shift towards thinking more long-term about what people are selling, what we're buying, who we're buying from. And I think people have become more aware of that, and it's definitely made people reassess. But it is a very interesting time. And I wonder what would have happened if we just carried on without it. And, we were talking a bit about the kind of frenzy and excitement that could build up around products and launches and retail, and whether that is sustainable and whether we all just kind of need to take a step back. And I mean, I personally had to reassess my fabric collection when we moved out, and it was that thing where next year I'm 50, so it's quite a landmark. And how much fabric do I have? It's quite a lot. Well, and actually I don't make that much a year, so
if it makes you feel any better, I've gone through the same process, and I've also moved house and closed the shop, so my connection to the KonMari method is tight.
Okay, good.
But I truly really believe in the philosophy, and it really helped me go through this time, and it's become part of my life to look at things that I want to surround myself with beautiful things, less items. Well, if you can look behind me, I'm not a minimalist, but I want to be conscious about what surrounds me and what makes me happy.
That looks quite minimal to me.
It does. Well, you're not seeing everything. And I was just gonna get into my yarn collection. I have my stash in a beautiful cupboard, shelves that used to belong to a carpenter. It has all small particles. I'm not sure. No, cubicles.
Compartments. Yeah.
Compartments. That's the word. Yeah. And it's completely full. It used to be in the shop. And I've worked out with basic math that if I knit 2 a year, I have enough until I'm 92.
Okay. It's
so
a
I guess
sobering thought.
Right around Sable. What's the Sable again? Stash acquirement beyond life expectancy.
Yeah.
But and this might sound really funny now, but I'm working on a course to teach people how to actually make aesthetically pleasing items from your stash and how to work with what you have. And if you don't have enough of one thing and you need to acquire more, which is fine, I'm not judging. And we all want the smaller businesses to stay. And then learning how to buy connecting to your values. Hopefully it will be an inspiring course to teach you how to actually use what you have to get that happy feeling again from when you first bought it.
I think I do. I mean, when I do go back and revisit what I have, I still love it. It still gives me lots of
Absolutely.
pleasure. Yes. I just kind of wish I had a bit more time. I think partly I've kind of switched to smaller projects like embroidery and small knitting projects because they're easier for me to pick up.
Yes.
But I love the process and construction of clothes and how they're made. So it's something that I just, when I go back to what I have in my stash, it's always a pleasure. And I kind of, even if you're just imagining what might be.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Even if I'm 70.
It's so funny. I think we're on parallel sides of a track. I have basic sewing skills and I'm trying to sew more now to make more of my wardrobe. So we should stay in touch and keep each other a little bit accountable on these things.
I think we should. That would be a great idea.
Thank you so much, Grace. I really enjoyed talking to you.
And me too. I love talking to you. And I really admire what you're doing with your business, and it's really inspirational. And I'm so pleased when you asked me. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thanks for coming. I hope you liked our little conversation about all things tools. And I wanted to wish you a wonderful 2022, full of joy, health, and inspiration. And I'll hope you be here in the next year to listen to a new episode of A Smaller Life. If you like A Smaller Life podcast, please share with your friends. Bye. The Whowell community brings together all levels of needle crafters and sellers in the knitting industry. We are committed to shed clutter, industry and social media overwhelm, and want to intentionally create our own wardrobes and home textiles. We use our collective knowledge, creativity, and materials, stash anyone, so that we can feel more inspired by what we already have, deepen our practice, live our values, be conscious consumers and sellers, and get more projects on our FO list. We are connecting to celebrate our love of knitting with passionate and committed friends. Become a member and support the podcast at the same time, starting at $10 a month. If you want to do deeper dives and really get to work, we offer memberships and courses for makers and sellers within the overarching community. Why not try it for a while and experience how the community will help you to get more done and make friends in the process?